Hey everyone, thanks for signing on to our webinar today. Today we're going to be going over how to share inventory among distributor groups. So I'll just take a couple minutes here to let everybody join. We'll get our group collected and then we'll get started. So while everyone is filtering in, I'll just take a minute to go over a few what do we call this? Housekeeping items. So hopefully you're seeing my screen now. A couple of things I just want to share, since I have you here, um, is just our resources section here on our website at ConnectSx.com. So hopefully if you have had an account for a while, you've had a chance to stop by and check this stuff out. But a few things to point out. The first would be our knowledge base. This is our prime support resource. This is where you can go to find articles and videos about really anything that you would need to do within ConnectSx. We're constantly adding to this and updating it. And right now, actually, we just started publishing a new type of article called playbooks. These are geared towards accomplishing a certain goal or answering a certain question that you may have or that we've heard from, another customer. And this is pulling a bunch of different features and pieces of functionality together to accomplish that goal. So, not support resources per se as you would typically think about them, like how to use this feature. Instead, it's how do I do this thing? And here is a guide that gets me from point A to point B, a total playbook for what you need to do. So we're building a database of those, which means we're also looking for ideas. So if you have any particular subjects that you're looking for a playbook on, let us know, and I'll write one, or one of our teammates will. So definitely check out the knowledge base. The next stop is just submitting a ticket. A lot of people will reach out to their customer success rep. That's still a totally viable way to do this. But submitting a ticket is the best way to get your issue seen as soon as possible, because it'll filter to our entire team all at once. As soon as you submit that ticket, our team will see it, and then it'll get prioritized and staged to the first available person. So that'll be the fastest way to get eyes on, the issue that you're having. So I know, if you've been on a webinar before, you've heard me talk about this stuff, but these are important things to go over. And the last thing I'd show you here is the webinar section on our website. And if you're here, you probably check this out, but we have our new webinar schedule going out through June. So if there are any new webinars here that you're interested in, just click and register, and we'll see you there. So yeah, we have a lot of new programming coming. All right, so it looks like everybody has been trickling in, and we'll get started. So hopefully you all are seeing the console now. And our subject today is going over how to share inventory within a distributor group. So the first stop will just be setting up that distributor group. So we're going to go to the users section, and you'll need to set up, if you haven't already, your distributor and sales users. So the easiest way to do that would be to click add user in the upper right corner here. And you can invite your users, but when we're doing this, I typically like to get these things set up behind the scenes before you let the users in, so that everything's already set up for them and there aren't any questions and no one's waiting for, inventory to get assigned or assignments to be done. So if you switch to the add new user option, you can just enter your email, select your role, enter a name, and go from there. So you'll need to create distributor users, one distributor user per distributorship, and as many sales users as you need for that distributorship. So that's an important point. Each distributor group can only have one distributor user. So that's the first thing to remember. And then we'll just pretend that I just created some new distributors and sales users. But I'm going to use, for our purposes here, some that we already have in this account. So if I go to my distributor user now, I'll want to go through all of the setup steps that you typically would with a new user. So, enter their contact information, mark them as training complete if they've been trained. Also go and enter all of their assignments. So assignments are a critical step. Do this for the distributor and the sales users. Um, you'll want to make sure they have all the facilities they're going to be using, product lines, physicians. Those are the three big ones. But if you have preference cards, and manufacturer, if you have preference cards and locations, those would be good to do too. But you definitely want to make sure the facilities, product lines, and physicians are assigned. And you do that just by selecting the category, and then you'd click in the field here and select from the drop-down menu, and then just go through the ones that they'll need. You can complete the assignments that way. So once you've completed the user setup, so you have your distributor user all set up, you have your sales users set up. Now you can come back to this distributor users detail screen and enter the assign users section. So a couple things we will want to do here. First, assign your sales users to this distributor. This is how we create the distributor group within ConnectSx. So your sales users will show up here, any of the ones that are available to add, and you just click on them just like you're assigning them in the assignment section, and that will add them to the assigned users list. So you can see them listed out below here. If you need to remove one, pretty obvious, you just hit the garbage can icon. So assign all the sales users that you'll need. And the next thing you need to do is right here, this setting, access to distributors inventory, you'll want to turn this on. So make sure it's purple and that it's on. That is what will enable the sharing of inventory among the distributor group. So what do we mean when I talk about sharing inventory within the distributor group? Because, I imagine the imagination could come up with a few different options. Essentially, what we're doing here is trying to cut down on the labor that transferring inventory would cause to a distributorship. When they're sharing inventory, just on a daily basis, maybe there are field transfers happening, at a hospital from one person's trunk stock to another. Maybe they're running into the warehouse and grabbing the tray that they need for that case, but they don't have time to stop and look it up on their app and do the transfer. Or maybe things are just moving back and forth all the time and you don't have time to do all those transfers. So this allows all of the users in the distributor group to access one pool of inventory. So essentially sharing it. Sales users can still have inventory in their own individual custody if you transfer it to them, but this setting gives all of those sales users access to the distributor's inventory. So it's the distributor's pool of inventory that then becomes open to be shared. And if that's not clear yet, hopefully it will become clear as we go through these examples. So the first step after you've set up your distributor group and you've enabled access to shared inventory is to make sure that your distributor has inventory. So we're going to go to movements, go to transfers. We're going to set up a new transfer to this distributor. So it's going from my organization. I'm looking at all of this from the perspective of an admin user, by the way. If you have any questions or you'd like to see something in particular from the perspective of a sales or a distributor user, let me know in the questions or Q&A section, or drop something in the chat and we can switch over and do that. So again, if I transfer to one of the sales users, totally viable and you're allowed to do that. The inventory will be in that sales user's custody only. It will not be allowed to be shared. So anything that you want to be used by the distributor or shared by the distributor group needs to go to the distributor. So I kind of recommend if you are using this method of sharing inventory, that you always transfer it to the distributor. Unless there are things that specifically are for one rep, um, in which case maybe you want to transfer it to that rep. It just makes the most sense, I think, to transfer everything to the distributor so it can be shared. That way you don't end up losing track, and mistakes aren't made, and then you don't have distributors and sales reps calling you being like, why can't I access my inventory? I'm in a case, all those bad things that we don't want to have happen. So now I'm going to just up my quantities a little bit so we have some inventory to play with. And I will, just for our purposes here, skip all these extra transfer features, and we'll get the transfer done so we can progress with our example. All right, I'm going to accept that. And now my distributor has some new inventory. So let's take a look at what's in the distributor's custody. Here we go. So I'm going to filter by custody. My distributorship is called Brendan Distributor Sweeney. And there we go. We got all our new inventory. So all this inventory, all 121 devices, these would be accessible by the sales rep. If you looked up inventory in the sales rep's custody, so let's see here, that I know is one of my sales reps. All of this inventory is only in the sales user's custody. Right now, it shouldn't be showing inventory that's in the distributor custody, but if I'm a sales user who has shared inventory, I would come into my inventory screen and I'd see two different custodies. I'd see inventory with my custody, and then I'd see inventory with the my distributor's custody as well. And I'd need to use filters just like this, using the custody field, if I wanted to view just one or the other. All right. So let's say now I have a case, and it's time to use inventory, but I'm a sales rep with shared inventory. How am I going to do that? How do I make sure I'm using inventory from my distributor and not from my own stock? So the way we're going to do that is I'm going to build a case real quick. I'll try to breeze through this and make it fast. Oh, might need to do a different procedure. There we go. Add your manufacturer, hit create. Okay, so now it's time to mark the used inventory. I'm a sales rep, like I mentioned, and I need to mark inventory that's in my distributor's custody, but being shared with me. You can see here, there's a couple right at the top with this red custody. That would be the distributor's custody. So they're really singling it out. Even though my sales rep is on the case, I can see that this inventory is now shared. So this is the filter I want to point out to you. I'm seeing this again from an admin perspective, but this will also be there if I'm a sales user. And I can filter between inventory that's in my custody only, inventory that's in both, or inventory that's only in the distributor's custody. So you want to make sure that your users know about that filter and know how to select the inventory that's appropriate for the use case. And then they just mark them as they would any other inventory and complete their case. So I just marked those devices as used. And then the rest of the case workflow is the same. So that's the big thing, is just making sure, once the inventory is transferred to the distributor and a sales user is in a case getting ready to use it, the big thing is just making sure that they are selecting the correct inventory. So if they use inventory that's in their stock, make sure they're selecting that one. If they're using inventory that's in the distributor's stock, make sure that they use that filter to select the right devices. You know, in most cases, as long as the lot number is correct, you'll all be good. But we want to make sure that the inventory counts and the different custodies stay correct and appropriate. So, that's really where this comes into play. All right. So, what else are we doing here in this webinar? There are some interesting use cases that arise, though, if you start doing this. One of those, and the main one I'm going to talk about today, is in the event that you do stocking orders with users that also have shared inventory. So how do you make that work? Let's do one. So I'm going to do a stocking order, which if you're not familiar, this use case is when you are, rather than a typical surgical case, you're selling inventory in bulk upfront directly to the facility. So they would keep it on the shelf and then they'd pull from it as they need it. The advantage here for them, is there's less billing potentially, but then they have the inventory in-house. They can pull from it as they need it. They don't need to call the rep to be on hand every time they do a case. I'm sure there are additional benefits to the facility, but those are just a few. So the inventory is sold in the stocking order and then becomes facility stock, if we're talking in terms of how things work in ConnectSx. So we will do this event, the stocking order, to sell the inventory, but then rather than being deactivated like it normally would, it would become facility stock and it would be allowed to be used at a later date. Because what occurs then, if this inventory is sitting on the shelf at a facility, it's going to get used someday. And we still need to record, which cases it was used in with which patients and maintain that traceability for quality and regulatory purposes. And you also want to keep track of how much inventory you have on that shelf. When do you need to restock? When do you need to sell more? So we do that by then circling back and performing cases with the facility stock. So we're going to go through all of this, but as if it was a distributor with shared inventory. So the first step, like I mentioned, is selling the inventory to the facility in a stocking order. Back to the top. So I'm going to, and this is the really key part, is I'm going to sell the inventory as the distributor. So let's think through that. I don't know which sales reps will inevitably be present when the inventory is finally used in a case with a patient. It might be one of my 3 reps. It might be one of the others. Additionally, I apologize. I'm having a brain fart. Additionally, no rep may be there, and you may need to assign the distributor when that case is finally done. So you want all the inventory to be in the distributor's custody because once it becomes facility stock, then it could be used by any of the users in the distributor group. So I will go through and quickly put this together. We'll do it at Mayo Clinic. All right. And just for our purposes today, I'm going to add all my product lines because I want to make sure all of the inventory that I have in here in this test account will be usable for us. So just bear with me. Thank you. I'll hit create. All right, so now our event has been created. I'm going to mark some inventory as used so we can turn it into facility stock and complete the sale. This should be enough devices for us. Since I am the distributor in this scenario, we're pulling from the distributor's inventory. There's not, a whole lot of filtering or anything to do at this stage. If I know the inventory I need, it's available, I just selected it. So I'll hit mark as used and I'll hit submit to complete the stocking order. Too many things at once. Forgetting my own name. All right, here we go. So the stocking order now will be complete, and you can send off the sales order, retrieve the PO for that event, and go through the whole billing process like you would for this stocking order. But the main point for our example here is that this inventory now has been sold to Mayo Clinic and is now available as facility stock in the system to be used in subsequent cases. So now, how do we view facility stock for a distributor? I'm going to go back to the all inventory page. I'll select my distributor in custody. Right. And then under status, I'm going to select facility stock. So, even in any regular situation where it's not a shared distributor, you can always go filter by facility stock to see what you have. That's a really good practice, I think, to keep track of, what facility stock you have. So remember that that is there under the status filter. So, all right, now I'm seeing all of my inventory in the distributor custody, and I am seeing that it's all facility stock. You can see the item status there. And it looks like I don't have too much risk of this stuff expiring. But, if I was a diligent manager of this inventory, I would go through this periodically and say, you know, what's expiring soon? Are these facilities going to be running out? Are they going to be at risk of using expired inventory? Um, that's kind of up to your company's policies of to what degree you're going to manage this stuff. I don't know if you replace expiring inventory with new inventory, or if you request it back, or if that's just left up to the facility. But in my mind, we don't want any of our inventory getting used if it's expired, regardless of who owns it. So keeping track of that stuff is a good idea here. Um, and then at this stage, the inventory could be used at any point in time by the facility to do a case. So let's say one of our reps goes in and takes a look at like the logbook or however the hospital keeps track of what's used in what cases, and they see that some of our inventory has been used in a case. What do we do now? So we come back and we enter a case. Maybe the rep is doing this, in which case they would only see the data that pertains to them. If anyone would like me to, I can switch over to a sales or distributor view, but I think we have some admins on this call, so I'll stay as an admin role unless it's specifically requested. And we'll see what that looks like. So now we're going to use the facility stock. So I'll enter a new event, and we're just going to keep the event type as case. We already did our stocking order, so now this is when the facility stock is getting used at a later date. So, representative, this should be who is covering the case. Our inventory is in a shared context, so it could be the distributor or it could be any of our sales reps that are assigned to that distributor. So, I'll actually do one of the sales users. Leave the name blank, but I'll select Mayo Clinic. It has to be the same facility where the inventory was originally sold. And then I'll just do a little plug here to make sure, if for our admins who are on the call, make sure all of your physician assignments are correct. I had a little snag earlier today with this. You want to make sure in the physicians section of the directory that all of your physicians have the necessary procedures assigned to them and facilities assigned. Similar to the user assignments, this is a really critical part of making sure your data is set up correctly. Because if you get to this stage, I could select here. I'll show you an example. I'll select this procedure, but then when I go to select my physicians, there's nothing there, because I don't have any physicians with that procedure assigned to them. Now, if I was to delete that and select a different procedure, all these physicians have that assigned. So it does limit based on the associations and assignments at the physician level. So make sure you have all that set up. Just a little plug from somebody who deals with a lot of support requests. Um, Set your date and hit next. Now we will enter our manufacturer. Everything else here should be good. I'll create my case. All right. So now we're going to mark the used inventory. So at this stage, I am a sales rep. I'm entering this case, and I want to make sure I'm pulling inventory from my distributorship. I want to do two different things here. First, I want to turn on the show facility stock items only. That is how we're going to make sure we're not using any live inventory. This is only the inventory that's previously been sold to the facility. That's critical because, I mean, first, you already sold it, and the inventory does, or the facility doesn't want to be billed for the inventory again. We'd be putting in the case incorrectly, and it would show as billable on the sales order, which is probably the most important thing. When you enter facility stock on a case, it will not show up as billable. It won't show up as a second sale because we don't want to double count or duplicate or bill twice, essentially. All right, so now I've selected my distributor, or actually, no, I'm sorry, I didn't. I just saw the red custody there. So you'll also then want to make sure your custodian filter that we looked at before is correct. So I am looking at inventory only shared by the distributor. So good. We can select the devices that are being used directly from the distributor's custody, and we're sure it is facility stock. So we're good to go. All right. So I got my inventory marked, my facility stock. We'll hit mark as used. You can see on our case, now we have a status of facility stock has been used. If we were to pull up the, well, here, let's submit the event. And I will request replenishment as well. It's always a good practice. I suppose even if the facility stock is being used, the manufacturer would like to know, I assume. So that might be more up to you and your policies. What are your workflows with your manufacturer? Do you do this in the event that facility stock is being used, or did you already request replenishment, when you sold it? But if you want to request it, that's available to you. And we'll move on from there. So yeah, we submitted this for billing, but again, there's not much billing to do because it's already been sold. There we go. So you could send off the bill sheet, but again, the bill sheet won't show as having anything billable on it, because although we are seeing the prices here, my billable total is 0. Cool. So we have now effectively sold inventory to a facility as a distributor with shared inventory, rendering it facility stock using a stocking order. Then we went back and used that facility stock as one of the sales reps sharing the inventory in a case. So that is how you can do that. I suppose now is as good a time as any to stop and see if anyone has any questions, because I've been going pretty fast through everything. I don't see anything in there right now. No open questions, nothing in the chat. So if you have anything that you'd like me to touch on, or anything I'm not clear about, or maybe I stumbled over my words at some point here, and that you need me to clarify, let me know. I will stop again at the end and make sure I'm answering any and all questions. All right. So let's see what's next. We did stocking orders. We did sharing inventory. Okay. So one of my next stops was just to think about, all right, I'm in a distributorship and we are sharing inventory among ourselves. That probably requires some degree of communication. And I know we live in a world with email and phone and texting, but we do have some tools in ConnectSx that might be useful for interacting with your team, especially in these contexts. So the first would be, since we're in an event, the first would be comments. So, if you've been a ConnectSx customer for a while, you no doubt have heard me beat the dead horse about some of our new comment features. So the first would be, you can always leave a comment. That would be the first thing here. But when you're leaving a comment, you can mention someone with the @ symbol. So this is a great example of where you might want to start doing this. So in this scenario, I am logged in as an admin, so I'm tagging the sales user here. But let's say I was the sales user and I just used all of the inventory that was left at a facility. So maybe I want to ping my distributor and let them know that Mayo Clinic is out of stock on a certain item that I'm totally making up. And then maybe also I want to say down to 5 units on this other item. Just as a note, it'll ping that distributor, letting them know that these items are down. They will see that they need to put in a new request to the manufacturer. They could also then respond to the sales user with their own mention and a comment to respond saying, I submitted a request, here's the number, something like that. You'll also notice that since we pinged this distributor, it added them as a comment recipient. So if you have a bunch or numerous sales reps who might be involved in a case or who are sharing inventory, it's not a terrible idea to make all of them watchers or some of them watchers, depending on what's relevant. Um, so comment recipients, you already heard me kind of doing it. These are essentially watchers of this comment stream on this event. So anyone I select here, they'll get a notification whenever a comment is left here. So at the very minimum, I think it makes sense to have the distributor be a comment watcher on any of these cases where their sales reps, are using shared inventory. But that also creates a lot of noise in your account. You'll get a lot of notifications and lots more comments to respond to. So to each their own in that respect. But these are some useful ways of staying connected and of communicating in context. That's the really big thing I want to drive home here is, you can text back and forth. I do it with distributors and sales reps all day. And I know how hard it is to be detailed when you're doing that. When you're shooting off a text that says, I need more of this item, that gives you no context. What communicating within the event stream using the comments features does is gives you tons of context. We know what case it is, we know what physician, we know what facility it's at, so where it needs to go. I even know what inventory was used. So if something doesn't make sense, I can come check that out here. I can see that it was facility stock. This is so much more information than I had than a second ago when we were just texting about it. So that is one useful feature to remember. Additionally, another thing to remember is tags. So you probably also heard me beat this dead horse at some point in your training. But with tags, we can essentially put searchable comments into our inventory, or searchable statuses that ConnectSx doesn't already accommodate for. So first, let me just filter by my custody to that distributor. There we go. Make sure I'm commenting on a useful piece of inventory. All right. Now, I just got to remember where we put tags. All right. Tags are up here at the top in the device information section of the device detail screen. To enter a tag, you just start typing anything, as you can see. You can select from the drop-down menu, or if you want to put in a new tag, just type what you want and hit enter. It'll get added there. You will need to click save on this page. Oh, okay, so this item is in the transfer. That's an issue for me in terms of saving, but for our purposes here, I think you all understand what a tag is. Essentially, you add it here as a user-defined search term, but there's a lot of reasons you could add tags. So any exception you can think of, any weird reason you might need to identify a piece of inventory, I bet I can figure out a way to use tags to help you. So one example that I'm thinking of already is, if we're sharing inventory in a distributor group, like we mentioned earlier, all the inventory should be going to that distributor in their custody. However, maybe you do want to partition the inventory into pools so that, maybe it needs to be shared sometimes, but maybe you want to delineate certain devices for a certain user. So maybe you want it for a certain case. I don't know. But whatever you want to do, I bet you can enter a tag for it. So, these are ways of claiming maybe, inventory. And then you could go back at a later date and search for anything that has this tag. And you'd pull up all of the inventory that was earmarked for that user or that case. So, some helpful ways of staying organized and communicating using the tools that are available to you. So, some things to think about there. Again, I was trying to introduce some of these concepts. I'm not sure of all of the scenarios you can think of that you might need to, organize or communicate between your distributor group. But if you have any in particular that you're wondering about, go ahead and drop them in the comments or the chat, and I'm happy to deal with them. All right. And let's see, what is next? So the last thing I wanted to go over is that we set this up with a distributor group, but you can actually use this in other use cases. So, maybe you have users who are operating in the same region, but are not part of the same distributorship. Maybe they're independent users. That's something you could still utilize this functionality to share inventory between them if that's something you want to do. So, maybe you want inventory to be able to be shared between two sales users who aren't part of a distributorship. You create a distributor user in here and link both sales users to them. Then you can enable shared inventory. There are, I'm sure, risks associated with doing that, but it is an option available to you. Additionally, maybe you have two sales reps that are from different distributorships who need to use facility stock at the same facility. So maybe maybe they're doing cases with two different doctors, but at the same facility. Maybe you just sometimes need to have one rep cover the cases for another rep because they're in similar regions. Excuse me, but they aren't actually part of the same distributorship. You can also set up a shared distributorship relationship for those users and then be able to combine the facility stock that way. So two sales users who aren't associated could use the same facility stock as long as they have that distributorship sharing arrangement. So there are some workarounds that you can use this functionality for to achieve different aims. So if you have any questions, please drop them into the chat. That kind of brings us to the end of what I had to cover here today. So I'll just talk for a couple minutes and see if anyone wants to submit any last minute questions or make any comments in the chat. And then otherwise, we will wrap things up and give you the rest of the hour back. All right, I am not seeing any comments flowing in. All right. Well, again, thank you for tuning in. I hope you learned something today. If you have any questions that you think of later, feel free to submit a ticket or drop me an email. And make sure to check out that webinar schedule and tune into our upcoming webinars out through June. Thank you very much and have a good rest of your day.